Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere you probably think you know, but I promise, you don't. We're stepping through the crooked wooden door of a medieval inn. It's going to smell like smoke-wet wool and something you can't quite identify, but definitely don't trust. The floorboards will complain under every step your feet will stick to places you wish they wouldn't, and the sound of strangers' laughter will carry more warning than welcome. You probably won't survive this night in one piece, at least, not without a new rash or a few suspicious bites. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The road here has been long, and the daylight is slipping fast. You've been walking for hours, maybe days, your boots picking up mud, and your shoulders aching beneath the weight of a pack. A thin drizzle has turned the air damp enough to cling to your skin, and when you finally spot the faint flickering glow of an inn's lantern ahead, it feels like stumbling on an oasis. The building itself leans slightly, like it's been drunk for 100 years. Timber beams, rough-hewn and weather-stained, form the skeleton of its walls. The wattle and daub between them is cracked in places, patched with whatever the innkeeper had on hand, more mud straw, maybe even a scrap of old cloth. As you get closer, you hear the muffled roar of conversation spilling out from behind thick wooden walls. The smell of wood smoke and cooking meat drifts into the road, carried by the night air. Your stomach tightens, not just with hunger, but with the strange, cautious excitement of stepping into a place where you don't know the rules and everyone inside has likely already noticed you're an outsider. The heavy oak door creaks under your push, and you're instantly swallowed by warmth and noise. Firelight flickers against the warped plaster walls, casting long shadows that stretch across the uneven floorboards. The ceiling is low enough that the taller guests have to mind their heads under the beams, which are darkened with centuries of smoke. The air is a blend of roasting meat, sour ale, unwashed wool, and human closeness. A serving girl threads her way between packed benches, her apron damp from the slop of spilled ale. Her eyes flick over you with practiced disinterest, already weighing whether you're worth the trouble. You catch snippets of talk, half in the local tongue, half in other accents that make the words sound strange. Someone laughs too loudly in the corner. Another coughs deep and wet into his sleeve. You make your way toward an empty stretch of wall, careful not to block anyone's way. The fire in the great hearth snaps and spits, sending little bursts of light into the dim room. A pot swings gently from its iron hook over the flames, the smell of stew mingling with the sharper tang of onions and something gamey, rabbit maybe, or pigeon. In a shadowed corner, a group of card players slap down their hands, with enough force to rattle the tankards beside them. The innkeeper, a thick-set man with a face like weathered oak, finally notices you. His tunic is stretched tight over his belly, his beard sprinkled with flour or ash. It's hard to tell which. He approaches with the slow, measured pace of someone who's seen every sort of traveler pass through his door and knows not all of them bring good news. His eyes scan you in one long, assessing sweep before he jerks his head toward a bench. Sit. You'll want something warm. You slide onto the bench, the wood smooth from years of weary travelers doing the same. The innkeeper disappears into the back, leaving you to absorb the rhythm of the room. A dog nosing around under tables pauses to sniff your boots before moving on. Somewhere above a floorboard creaks someone pacing in their room, or maybe just the building settling for the night. The serving girl returns, setting down a battered pewter cup in front of you. The ale inside is cloudy, the foam already slipping away to reveal something more amber than gold. It's sour on the tongue, but the warmth it sends curling down into your stomach is welcome. You sip slowly, letting the room settle around you. In the flicker of firelight, you start to notice the details. The walls bear little decorations, maybe a hunting trophy, a cracked plate, a carving so worn it's hard to tell if it's a saint or just some old wood chipped into a shape. The benches and tables are mismatched, repaired again and again with odd scraps of timber. Everything here has been used beyond what you'd think possible, yet it still holds together. A shout goes up from near the fire, drawing your attention. Two men are arguing over something, cards, dice, or just drink-loosened pride. One slams a fist against the table, rattling the cups. The other leans forward, jabbing a finger in his face. But then just as quickly the tension eases. A friend laughs, slapping both men on the shoulders, and the shouting dissolves into a round of toasts. That's how it is here. Anger flares like a struck match, then burns itself out just as fast. Your eyes wander to the door again. A new arrival is stamping the mud from his boots, water dripping from the brim of his hat. He looks around the room like he already knows it, though maybe that's just the confidence of someone who's been here before. You notice how quickly he's folded into the noise and heat, how a nod from one table, a raised cup from another, is enough to make him part of the place. You sip again from your ale, feeling the edges of the day soften. Outside, the drizzle has thickened into a steady rain. You're glad you made it here before dark fully swallowed the road. The inn's warmth feels like a shield now. One that you'll cling to for as long as you can, before the night reminds you just how temporary such shelter really is. The rain has taken ownership of the night now, drumming against the roof in a slow, relentless rhythm. Somewhere, water finds a way through a seam in the shingles. A thin, steady drip echoes from the far side of the room, falling into a tin bucket placed there long before you arrived. No one pays it any mind, it's just another voice in the choir of sounds that makes up an inn after dark. Your cup is nearly empty when the innkeeper returns this time, with a wooden trencher balanced expertly on one thick palm. He slides it in front of you without a word. On it, you find a thick slice of coarse brown bread, a lump of pale cheese with a rind like worn leather, and a wooden bowl of stew that gives off a comforting steam. It smells of carrots, onion, and something with bones. You stir it gently, the broth dark and cloudy, flecked with tiny islands of fat. The bread is tough at first bite, but it soaks up the broth well, turning soft against your teeth. The cheese is sharp, grainy, a little sour, but in the dim light after a long day, it tastes like exactly what you needed. You notice the other tables receiving much the same fare. No one here expects variety. This is not a place where menus exist. It's a place where the pot cooks all day, and everyone gets a ladleful of whatever's in it. In truth, that's probably for the best. You don't want to see the kitchen. The one glimpse you caught when the serving girl pushed through the swinging back door showed a hearth so large it could swallow you, with spits turning slowly, meat glistening in the firelight. A haze of smoke clung to the rafters, and an old woman stirred a pot with a spoon so long it could double as a weapon. The serving girl returns to sweep away the crumbs from a nearby table, humming something under her breath. Her movements are quick, sharp, not the gentle grace of someone who's performing for tips, but the economy of someone who needs to finish her work before she's pulled into the next chore. She glances toward the door when it creaks open again, her eyes narrowing slightly. A group of 3 men stumble in from the rain, shaking water from their cloaks like dogs. Their laughter fills the air in big, rough bursts, and they take up space as if the inn were theirs. One of them, a tall, thin man with a narrow face, catches sight of you and gives a small nod. It's hard to tell if it's a greeting or a warning. They make straight for the hearth, crowding into a space that's somehow cleared just for them. A moment later, the innkeeper himself comes over, speaking in low tones, the kind that carry a weight you can feel even without hearing the words. The rest of the room seems to pretend not to notice, which means they absolutely notice. But this is the way of inn's secrets sit in the open, and everyone politely ignores them until they're no longer secrets. You finish your stew slowly, stretching the moment. The ale in your belly has started to cast its glow, warming you from the inside out. The conversations around you swell and fade like the tide. You catch words about the harvest, the price of wool, the condition of the road to the next town. Someone complains loudly about a missing shoe. Another insists it was stolen, not lost. The arguments here are small, everyday things, though you suspect they can turn sharp without much warning. A thin cat pads into view, winding between the benches, its tail held high. It pauses by your feet, eyes reflecting the firelight in two perfect green coins. You drop a scrap of bread, and it snatches it up before disappearing under another table. Above you, the floor creaks again, louder this time. A muffled thump follows a dropped boot, maybe, or someone staggering into the wall. The sound makes you wonder what the rooms above are like. The idea of climbing into a bed right now is tempting, but you know medieval beds aren't what you're imagining. There will be straw, and not the fresh kind. There will be lumps, and maybe something still alive in them. And there will be walls thin enough for every cough, snore, and whispered argument to leak through. The rain keeps falling. It smooths the edges of the noise inside like a low drumbeat under the sharper notes of conversation and clinking cups. You find yourself leaning back, letting the warmth and the rhythm lull you. Even the shadows on the walls seem to sway in time with it. Then, without warning, the tall, thin man from the hearth slams his mug down on the table so hard the room flinches. His friends lean in their voices, dropping to a low growl. A nearby card player glances over his shoulder, eyes narrowing, before returning to his game. Whatever's happening at that table, it's not your business. But you can't help feeling that in a place like this, someone else's trouble can become yours very quickly. You drain the last of your ale, setting the cup down gently. The fire crackles, throwing up a spray of sparks that drift briefly in the warm air before winking out. Somewhere behind you, the door opens again, letting in a gust of cold, wet air. A lone traveler steps inside his cloak, soaked through his hood pulled low. He pauses just inside the threshold, as if deciding whether this is the kind of place he wants to spend the night. You know the answer doesn't matter. Out there, the road is dark, the rain relentless, and the night long. In here, at least, there's a fire, and for now, that's enough. The lone traveler is still dripping by the door when you decide it's time to find a place to sleep. The stew has left a warm heaviness in your stomach, the ale a soft haze in your head. The fire's hypnotic crackle could keep you here all night, but you know the benches will grow hard, the noise will sharpen, and sooner or later someone will knock over your cup. You catch the innkeeper's eye and make a small gesture upward. He jerks his head toward a shadowed staircase tucked behind the main room. It's narrow, almost a ladder, and the steps sag under your weight as you climb. The wood groans in protest, each creak loud enough to carry through the whole building. A faint draft threads down the stairwell, carrying with it the sense of damp straw, tallow smoke, and the indefinable musk of bodies sleeping too close together. At the top, the air feels different, cooler, stiller. A single candle flickers in a wall niche, its light barely reaching the far end of the corridor. The floorboards here tilt and dip unpredictably, as if the building has been slowly warping for generations. Your boots scuff over the boards, the sound oddly loud in the hush. Your room, if you can call it that, is a small enclosure partitioned from its neighbors by thin planks. The door is just a plank on crude hinges without a lock. Inside, there's a low bed frame pushed against the wall, piled with a mattress of straw ticking. The mattress is lumpy, the linen cover stained and patched in more places than you care to count. A single woolen blanket lies folded at the foot, rough to the touch, and smelling faintly of smoke. You suspect it was hung near the hearth downstairs to dry not long ago. A tallow candle stands in a stubby wooden holder on a small table. Beside it, a clay jug of water and a battered cup. You can't tell if the water is fresh, but it catches the candlelight in a dull sheen. Against one wall, a wooden chest sits with its lid propped open, empty, save for a few wisps of straw and the ghost of a mouse's nest. You sit on the bed cautiously. The straw shifts beneath you, crunching faintly. It's not as uncomfortable as you feared, though you're careful not to think too hard about what might be sharing the bedding with you. The blanket, coarse and scratchy, promises warmth at the expense of softness. You remind yourself that compared to sleeping in a ditch under a rain-soaked cloak, this is luxury. The walls between the rooms don't even try to keep secrets. You can hear a man in the next room muttering to himself as he undresses, the rustle of cloth loud in the stillness. Beyond him, a woman's laugh, low and knowing, followed by the soft scrape of a chair leg. Somewhere further down the corridor, a child coughs, the sound echoing like it's in your own space. You place your pack at the head of the bed, tucking it under the blanket. In a place where locks are a rarity, your belongings are safest where you can feel them against your body. The floorboard by the door is loose when you step on it. It clacks softly. You make a mental note if anyone enters in the night, you'll hear them. Outside, the rain keeps its steady rhythm tapping against the small, warped window pane. You can see nothing through the wavy glass but darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, then falls silent. The inn seems to sigh as it settles for the night, its timbers flexing with the wind. You blow out the candle, but the darkness here is different from the road. Downstairs, firelight and noise kept you tethered to the waking world. Here the blackness presses closer, broken only by the faint orange pulse seeping through the cracks in the floorboards from the hearth below. The smell of wood smoke clings to the air. Lying back, you pull the blanket over you. The straw shifts again under your weight, releasing a faint, dusty scent. You close your eyes, listening. Footsteps creak in the corridor, slow, deliberate. They pass your door and fade toward the stairs. A door opens somewhere, then shuts with a hollow thump. The wind presses against the wall, making it shudder faintly. You're on the edge of drifting when you hear a murmur. Two voices close. They're speaking low, too low to catch the words, but there's an urgency in the rhythm. A soft laugh follows, quickly stifled. The sound of feet shuffling, then silence. You're left with the whisper of rain, the occasional groan of a settling beam. The bed's warmth is creeping in now, softening the sharpness of the straw beneath you. You pull the blanket tighter, tucking it around your shoulders. Your body remembers the day's journey, the miles walked, the weight carried. The inn has its flaws, its smells, its noise, its thin walls, but tonight it's enough. Out there, the road is cold, the rain unending. In here, you have a bed, a roof, and for a few hours at least, the fragile luxury of rest. The inn is never truly quiet. Even now, with most of its guests tucked away in their beds, the building holds a restless undercurrent. The timbers creak like old bones turning in sleep. Somewhere a door opens, then closes again, with a dull thud. The wind presses against the shutters, rattling them just enough to suggest someone might be trying them from the outside. You shift on the mattress, the straw whispering beneath you. Sleep hovers near, but refuses to settle. The voices you heard earlier stir your curiosity. Inns are crossroads, places where strangers meet, part, and sometimes conspire. And now, with the rest of the building subdued, the soft scuff of footsteps in the hall carries far too clearly. The steps pause near your door. You hold your breath. The loose floorboard clacks just once and then silence. You picture someone standing there listening, deciding. A moment later, the steps retreat, fading toward the far end of the corridor. You let out a slow breath, telling yourself it's just another guest finding their room. But in a place where walls are thin and locks are rare, you can't help wondering what or who was being weighed in that moment. Below you, a muffled burst of laughter rises from the tap room. It's followed by a heavy scraping sound, chairs dragging over the uneven floor. A tankard slams onto a table. The voices are fewer now, but sharper, the kind that cut through the smoky air and hang there waiting for an answer. You imagine the handful of late drinkers huddled by the dying fire, their faces lit from below by the last embers, talking about things better left unheard. Your mind drifts to the stories you've heard about inns, how they sometimes doubled as markets for stolen goods, or way stations for messengers who couldn't be seen in the daylight. How a man could disappear from one, and no one would ever admit he was there. This inn doesn't seem so dangerous, not with its warm bread and quiet cat. But danger rarely announces itself with a trumpet blast. More often it arrives quietly, holding a mug of ale and wearing a smile that doesn't quite reach its eyes. The rain against the roof becomes heavier, masking the smaller sounds. But not all of them. There's a knock not on your door, but somewhere down the hall. A quick rap, then a pause. A door opens just enough to let the visitor in. The hinges groan, then shut again. Footsteps cross a floor. The voices are low and clipped, punctuated by the faint clink of metal coins maybe, or something sharper. You shift beneath your blanket, pulling it up to your chin. It's not fear exactly, but you're keenly aware you're the outsider here. Everyone else seems to have stepped into their roles without thinking regulars locals, or at least people who know the etiquette of this place. You're the only one who arrived wide-eyed and dripping at the threshold, unsure where to stand, unsure which glances are welcome and which are warnings. The candle stub on your little table catches your eye. You strike a flint, coaxing a small flame to life. The room becomes warmer again in the soft flicker. Shadows stretch long across the warped boards. You take a moment to pour yourself a sip from the jug, the water tasting faintly of wood and clay. From below comes the sound of the front door opening. The rain rushes in with it, and a gust rattles the shutters in your room. The newcomer's boots stamp on the floor, heavy and deliberate. There's a murmur of greeting, low, respectful. Whoever it is, they matter here. chairs scrape back, and the rhythm of the room changes. It's like watching a flock of birds shift direction all at once. The voices remain low, but you catch the faint edge of urgency in them. The words mean nothing to you, but the tone is unmistakable. This is business, not idle talk. The conversation swells for a moment, then dies away, replaced by the sound of more coins changing hands. The innkeeper's voice floats up through the cracks in the floor, measured calm, like a man who knows exactly how to handle this kind of exchange. Eventually, the footsteps head toward the stairs. They climb slowly, pausing at each creak as though counting them. The air in the corridor changes before you even see him. A broad shadow fills the doorway, passing by, not stopping, and the faint smell of wet leather follows in its wake. A key turns in a lock a few doors down. You didn't know any of these rooms had locks. The building exhales again, and the wind presses harder against the shutters. Somewhere a cat yowls high and startled before darting away. The rain softens for a moment, then redoubles, hammering the roof like a drumbeat. You blow out the candle once more, sinking back into the darkness, letting the night carry its quiet, secret business beyond your sight. The hour is deep enough now that the day's business, both the honest and the questionable, has mostly finished. The noises have thinned into long pauses, each one thick with stillness. The fire downstairs is almost certainly reduced to embers. The rain has become a quieter thing, a whisper instead of a drumbeat, and in its place you can hear the softer, more unsettling music of a sleeping building. Somewhere close, someone snores with determination, drawing in air like they mean to keep it. It rattles through the thin walls, rises in pitch, then drops into a wheezy sigh before starting all over again. From further off comes a lighter sound, a man mumbling in his dreams. At first it's just nonsense syllables, but every so often a word emerges crisp and oddly sharp. You can't tell if it's a plea or a curse. The straw beneath you shifts when you turn, sighing faintly. Bits of it scratch against your skin where the thin linen has pulled away. A faint, musty smell rises, mingled with the smoky tang that clings to everything in the building. The blanket, coarse as it is, traps your body heat, and you find yourself sinking into a rhythm. Listen, shift, breathe, listen again. From the corridor comes a slow, dragging step. Not hurried, not trying to be quiet, just unsteady. It stops outside your door, then resumes passing on toward the stairs. The loose board clacks once beneath the weight. You imagine a late drinker finally giving up on the last dregs in his mug, finding his way to whatever straw bed awaits him. But the sound repeats a few minutes later, going the other direction, as though the same unsteady figure is pacing a private track. A muffled thump shakes the wall beside your bed. Someone in the next room, shifting perhaps. Then a cough, short, rough. The bed frame squeals faintly. After that, a creak from the floor above, which shouldn't exist, but somehow does, just the kind of sound an old building invents in the night to remind you it's alive. Your eyes have adjusted to the blackness now. The faint orange glow from the hearth downstairs no longer feels like an intruder. It's a comfort, a little ember of proof that the world hasn't slipped entirely into shadow. You think you see movement in it once or twice, but it's only the shadows playing tricks on your tired mind. The air in your room shifts cooler for a moment. It's the draft under the door, small but enough to bring the smell of something frying faintly downstairs. Not breakfast, not yet. something more like fat sizzling over a fire. Perhaps someone needed a late-night snack, or perhaps one of the inn's night watchful figures is keeping themselves company at the hearth. You can almost picture them hunched over the pan, one hand turning the meat, the other cupped around a mug. A faint rustle at your feet pulls you from the thought. You freeze, breath held, listening. There it is again, a soft, deliberate scuffle in the straw. You shift your legs slightly, and whatever it is scurries away. You tell yourself it's the cat. You don't really believe it's the cat. Outside the shutters, the wind picks up, pushing rain against the glass in tiny bursts. The sound is oddly comforting, a reminder that you are inside, away from the wet and the cold. Still, you can't help imagining the road at this hour, slick dark and utterly deserted, save for the occasional poor soul making for the next speck of light on the horizon. Sleep begins to take you in little dips and swells. You drift just far enough that the snoring and coughing fade into the background. Hum, but then some small sound will snag you back. Boots on stairs, the click of a latch, the low murmur of voices testing whether anyone is awake to overhear them. At some point, the pacing in the corridor stops for good. You don't remember when. The building settles deeper into its breathing, each creak slower, more patient. The blanket's weight grows heavier, the straw softer, the outside world further away. You are on the brink of surrendering to full sleep when a sharp rap sounds against wood, not your door, but close. It's enough to make your heart kick against your ribs. Then silence. No footsteps, no whispers, just the waiting stillness. After a moment, the inn exhales again, and so do you. The knock fades into memory, swallowed by the building's slow breathing. At some point, your mind loosens its grip on the waking world entirely. You drift into a shallow, uncertain sleep, one of those half-dreaming states where time slides past in strange, uneven steps. When you surface again, it's not because you've rested enough, but because the inn has decided the night is over. It starts with the softest of cues, the change in light. There's a thin, pale streak pushing through the warped window, faint but insistent. It's enough to outline the rough grain of the shutters and the uneven seams in the wall. The darkness that filled the room is no longer a blanket. It's thinning, leaking away into morning. Then come the first human sounds. Somewhere down the corridor, a door opens with a long, reluctant creak. Bare feet pad softly over boards. A muffled cough follows the sort you give before stepping into a new day. The inn's night noises, slow pacing, quiet murmurs, are giving way to the practical sounds of people shaking off sleep. The first real intrusion is the smell. It seeps under your door, creeping over your bed and pulling you upward from the straw. It's not just the old tang of smoke and wool, now it's bread. Bread warming on a hearth, its yeasty scent blooming in the air. Beneath it, the faint but welcome hint of something frying in fat. Your stomach reminds you it's been hours since that slice of bread and bowl of stew. Below the fire is alive again. You can hear it in the different quality of the wood's crackle, less the random sigh of embers, more the urgent chatter of flames fed with new logs. Voices join it low at first, then louder as more people gather. The innkeeper's is unmistakable gruff, but not unkind. You imagine him standing by the hearth with a mug in hand, issuing short instructions to his helpers as the day's first pot of ale is drawn. Your own joints complain as you sit up. The straw has shifted into small hills and valleys under your weight, and you push it back into place with your hands before swinging your legs to the floor. The boards are cold, the chill climbing quickly through your feet. You pull on your boots and reach for your cloak, stiff from yesterday's rain. The corridor is already busy. The woman from the room 2 doors down steps past you, her hair unbound and tumbling over her shoulders. She nods briefly, but keeps walking. Behind her, a boy, perhaps a helper in the inn, hauls a bucket sloshing with water toward the stairs, leaving a thin trail in his wake. Downstairs, the change is striking. The long trestle tables that only hours ago were cluttered with mugs, crumbs, and dice have been cleared, wiped with damp cloths. A new fire roars in the great hearth, its heat already reaching across the room. A pot hangs above it, steam curling into the rafters. The serving girl moves briskly between tables, setting down bowls, refilling cups, nudging the early risers into making way for more. Outside the door, you catch a glimpse of gray daylight. The rain has slowed to a mist, beating on the cloaks of the few figures already venturing into the street. A cart rumbles past its driver, huddled deep into his hood wheels, squelching in the wet earth. Your own breakfast is placed before you without ceremony, another slice of coarse bread still warm enough to steam when torn, and a small wooden bowl of porridge thick with grains. It's plain, but you welcome the heat of it as it slips into your belly. A drizzle of honey, rare luxury, glints on the surface. You savor it slowly, watching the room fill. The inn feels different in morning light. The shadows are fewer, the secrets tucked away. The same men who muttered in the corners last night now sit openly talking about the road ahead, weighing the worth of goods, deciding whether to risk the river crossing. Laughter rises easily now, though it's tempered by yawns and the occasional grimace at sore backs. You notice the tall, thin man from last night, the one whose presence seemed to shift the air around him. He's leaning against a post, speaking quietly with the innkeeper. They exchange a few coins, shake hands, and part without ceremony. He doesn't glance your way, and you don't expect him to. Outside the window, the mist begins to lift, showing the uneven rooftops of the street beyond. The day is beginning, and soon this place will empty. By noon, the fire will be lower, the benches quieter, the air thinner without so many bodies pressed close. Tonight, a different mix of faces will fill it again. You finish the last bite of bread and set the cup down. The room is growing busier by the minute. Somewhere in this tangle of strangers and smells, the inn is telling you the same thing. It tells every traveler time to be on your way. You pull your cloak tighter as you step toward the door. The serving girl sidesteps you with a stack of bowls in her arms, already half turned toward her next task. The innkeeper gives you a nod, brief but enough to mark your departure as noted. He's already turned his attention back to a man demanding another cup of ale before the road calls him away. The door pushes open against the damp morning air, heavy with mist. Outside, the town is already stirring. The muddy lane in front of the inn carries a slow but steady stream of movement carts, with their wooden wheels, groaning men with baskets slung across their backs, women bent under the weight of sacks filled with flour or grain. The sound of hooves clops irregularly against the wet earth. You pause just beyond the threshold. The inn looks different from out here, less like a haven, more like another crooked piece of the town's patchwork. The timber frame is darker now that the rain has slicked it down. A faded sign swings from an iron bracket above the door. Its painted letters nearly gone, the image some kind of animal, maybe a stag blurred into abstraction. You realize you'd barely noticed it when you arrived last night. The mist hangs low, blurring the edges of buildings. Roofs lean into each other like conspirators, their eaves dripping with the night's rain. Somewhere nearby, a smith's hammer rings against metal in slow, measured blows. The smell of baking bread seeps into the street from a shop 2 doors down, mingling with the sharper scent of wet hay and the faint tang of horse manure. Across the way, another inn, smaller, darker, spills its own set of guests into the lane. They shuffle into the morning with their heads low, their clothes damp at the hems. One of them lights a pipe, the smoke curling upward until it fades into the gray air. For a moment you imagine the two inns as rival camps, their regulars eyeing each other with a blend of suspicion and familiarity. The ground is soft beneath your boots, clinging to the soles with each step. Puddles reflect the shifting silhouettes of people passing by, the ripples breaking them into fragments. Children dart between the grown-ups, their shouts cutting through the muffled street sounds. A dog noses at the gutter, wagging its tail at some invisible prize. You glance back at the inn's doorway. Another traveler emerges, blinking into the light. He pauses, taking in the street with the same mixture of interest and resignation you felt just moments ago. The door swings shut behind him, sealing in the warm murmur of voices and the smell of smoke. From here, the inn seems to retreat into itself, ready to wait for the next wave of arrivals tonight. You make your way along the lane, the inn shrinking behind you. The street bends gently, pulling it out of sight. You pass market stalls setting up for the day, tables draped with rough cloths, baskets of onions and apples tipped out in casual abundance. A fishmonger lays out his catch, the silver scales glistening even in the muted light. The sharp, salt-water tang of them cuts briefly through the heavier smells of the town. At the far end of the street, the town gates are just visible through the thinning mist. A pair of guards stand there, cloaks pulled tight against the chill. Beyond them, the road stretches into the open countryside, damp fields, low hedgerows, and the faint suggestion of a forest in the distance. For a moment you stand between two worlds. Behind you, the inn holds the echo of last night, the warmth, the noise, the clatter of cups, and the hum of strangers sharing the same roof. Ahead, the road promises the next chapter, though it offers no guarantee of shelter like the one you just left. You take a last look over your shoulder. The inn is gone from view now, folded back into the maze of streets, waiting for the next traveler to stumble in from the rain. The mist thins as you move beyond the town gates, replaced by the open air of the countryside. The road stretches ahead in a muted ribbon of mud and stone, the edges softened by grass and the occasional puddle. Your boots leave deep prints each step, accompanied by the faint suction of wet earth. The air tastes clean here, washed by last night's rain, though the wind carries the faint scent of smoke from hearths burning somewhere far behind you. The world is quieter once the town falls away. The clatter of carts and market voices is replaced by the caw of crows perched on bare branches. They watch your passing with the idle curiosity of creatures who have seen travelers come and go for centuries. Somewhere in the hedgerow, a sparrow bursts into sudden flight, its wings a soft, startled flutter against the damp air. The road dips toward a shallow stream, its surface broken by the rain's lingering patter. A narrow wooden bridge spans it just wide enough for a cart with railings slick from the night's weather. The water below runs fast, curling around smooth stones and carrying tiny branches downstream. You pause in the middle, leaning slightly over the rail. The sound of the water's movement is steady, hypnotic, a soft rush that could almost draw you under if you listened too long. By midday, the clouds have lifted slightly, letting a muted light spill over the fields. You pass a shepherd leaning on his crook, his sheep scattered across the wet grass in lazy clusters. He gives you a nod but doesn't speak, his gaze already drifting back to his flock. A pair of farmhands trudge along the road in the opposite direction, their clothes spattered with mud. They carry small bundles and speak in low voices, pausing briefly to give you a glance before continuing on. The miles pass in an unhurried rhythm, mud puddle, boot breath. The road is not entirely empty. A merchant's cart rumbles ahead of you for a while, the driver hunched against the wind. The cart's wooden wheels leave sharp, wet grooves in the mud that slowly soften behind it. The horse pulling it shakes its mane, sending droplets scattering into the air. As the afternoon tilts toward evening, you begin to watch the horizon for signs of shelter. The air cools quickly. Once the light shifts, the damp finding its way into your bones again. Shadows stretch across the road, long and bending. You know better than to let night catch you out here. The stories told in the corners of inns about travelers disappearing on lonely roads aren't all just for entertainment. Then at last you see it, a faint glimmer of firelight flickering against the growing dusk. The shape of a building emerges slowly from the blur of hedges and bare trees. The roofline is low and thatched, the chimney, breathing a steady plume of smoke into the cold air. The sight is enough to ease your shoulders, to let your pace quicken, despite the weight of the day's walk. The track leading to the door is little more than churned mud patterned with hoof prints and boot marks from earlier arrivals. The building leans slightly as if bowing under the years, its timbers dark and rough. A lantern sways above the doorway, its light spilling across the wet ground. Pushing open the heavy door, you step into a burst of warmth and sound. This inn is smaller than the one you left this morning, the ceiling lower, the fire closer. The air smells of wood smoke, stewing vegetables, and the faint metallic tang of ale. The benches are crowded, but not chaotic. This is a quieter place, the kind of inn that collects locals in steady conversation, rather than strangers in noisy bouts of dice. The innkeeper, a woman this time, glances up from behind the counter. She sizes you up with a quick, practical look, then nods toward an empty space near the fire. "You look wet through," she says, her voice brisk, but not unkind. "Sit. I'll bring you something hot." You settle into the bench, letting the heat of the fire lick at your damp boots. A couple of men at a nearby table glance your way, curiosity in their eyes, but no challenge. Their conversation resumes the rise and fall of their voices, merging with the crackle of the hearth. You realize you've entered a different kind of inn entirely, less a crossroads of travelers, and more the hearthstone of a small, tight-knit place. The feeling is quieter, but no less welcome. For tonight it will be enough. If you'd like, I can keep the momentum going into Section 9, where the rhythm of this smaller inn reveals itself, its slower conversations, its familiar regulars, and the small rituals that make it feel like home to those who belong. The fire is the heart of this place, and you feel its pull as soon as you've settled. It's not the sprawling hearth of a town inn, just a wide stone fireplace set into one wall, the flames playing over logs that pop softly in the heat. The warmth rolls outward, wrapping itself around you, coaxing the stiffness from your shoulders. The innkeeper returns with a wooden trencher and a steaming cup. She sets them before you with the brisk certainty of someone who's done this hundreds of times. The stew in the bowl is thick and brown, dotted with carrots and shreds of meat so soft they fall apart on the spoon. Beside it, a heel of dark bread sits heavy in your palm. The ale in your cup is darker than what you drank last night, its foam clinging stubbornly to the rim. The first sip is rich and slightly bitter, but smooth, the kind of drink meant to be nursed slowly. Around you, the evening unfolds in gentle ripples. A man with a lute plucks at the strings in the corner, not a performance, just quiet notes tumbling into the air between sips of his drink. Two older women at the next table trade news in low voices, their hands busy mending small scraps of cloth. A boy sprawls on a bench near the fire, chin in hand, eyes half closed as he listens to the conversations swirling around him. This is a place where people don't speak to fill the silence. Pauses are comfortable here, broken only when there's something worth saying. When a burst of laughter does come, it's soft and short, rippling through the room like the gentle lift of a breeze. The innkeeper drifts between tables with an easy familiarity, topping up cups before they're empty, exchanging a few words with each guest. At one point, she kneels by the fire to shift a log, sending a spray of sparks upward. You catch her humming under her breath, the tune as steady as the rhythm of the flames. The door opens briefly to admit a gust of cold night air. A farmer steps in, stamping the mud from his boots. He exchanges nods with half the room before making his way to the bar, where the innkeeper pours him a drink without needing to be told what he wants. The regulars greet him as if he's simply returned from a brief errand, not a day's work. You realize quickly that in a place like this, you're not expected to offer much of yourself. Being a quiet observer is welcome enough. The warmth, the food, and the steady hum of conversation are given freely as long as you add nothing sharp to the mix. A small black cat slinks into view, its movements liquid in the firelight. It leaps silently onto the bench beside you, curling into a tight ball without asking permission. Its fur radiates heat, and you feel the faint rumble of its purr through the wood beneath you. No one glances over it, clearly belongs here as much a fixture as the fire itself. You sip your ale again, letting its weight settle into you. Outside, the wind tugs at the thatch, and the door rattles softly in its frame. The sound only sharpens the comfort of where you are. As the evening deepens, the lute player sets his instrument aside and joins a table near the fire. The conversations grow slower, the spaces between words longer. Someone yawns without shame. The boy on the bench has slid down until his head rests on a folded cloak, his breathing slow and even. This inn doesn't trade in spectacle or noise. Its wealth lies in the way it folds you into its rhythm, without asking anything in return. Tonight, your place is here at the edge of the firelight, with the smell of bread and wood smoke thick in the air. The slow murmur of voices smoothing the edges of the day. The inn exhales with the kind of long, contented sigh only a building can give timbers. Settling, the fire shrinking into a bed of glowing embers. The day's voices thinning until they're little more than murmurs in the corners. The air feels heavier now, filled with the warmth of the hearth and the faint sweetness of smoke that lingers in your throat. The innkeeper moves more slowly than she did earlier, her tasks pared down to quiet rituals. She collects empty cups, wiping the rims with the hem of her apron. She tips the dregs from mugs into a pail and leaves them in a neat row on the counter. Now and again, she pauses to lean against the bar, listening with half a smile to a story being told in the low, even tone of someone who has told it before. You've eaten your fill and sipped the ale down to the last stubborn swallow. The stew's warmth is still lodged deep in your belly, making your limbs heavy. You find yourself staring at the fire without really seeing it, your thoughts moving like slow water over smooth stones. The cat beside you has shifted once or twice, but each time it settles back into its small, steady breathing. The room's conversations have dwindled into 2 or 3 threads. A man speaks quietly about the weather and the planting season ahead. A pair of young men near the door argue gently over the best route to a neighboring village, tracing invisible lines on the table with their fingers. No one raises their voice here. No one needs to. When the door opens now, it's for the last few stragglers. The farmer you saw earlier slips out without a word, his shoulders hunched against the cold. A tall figure, in a hooded cloak, follows soon after, moving with the slow purpose of someone who knows exactly where they're going. Each time the door shuts, the inn seems to fold in tighter around those who remain. Eventually, the lute player rises from his bench, stretches, and makes his way upstairs, his boots quiet on the steps. The boy by the fire is lifted gently by one of the older women and led toward the narrow staircase, his head lolling against her shoulder. The innkeeper catches your eye and tips her chin toward the stair as well. Up before the fire's out, she says softly, more advice than instruction. You rise, joints protesting just enough to remind you of the miles behind you. The cat uncurls and slips away without a backward glance. Your cup is left on the table, your place by the fire, already ready to be claimed by someone else tomorrow. Upstairs, the hall is dim, lit only by a candle in a wall niche. The air is cooler here, tinged with the faint sourness of damp wool. Your room is small, just a low bed with a straw mattress, a folded blanket, and a stool beside the door. It smells faintly of last night's smoke and the soap used to scrub the floor weeks ago. You set your pack down and sit on the edge of the bed. The straw shifts and sighs under your weight. You loosen your boots and stretch your toes into the cool air. Through the thin wall, you hear the faint rustle of someone settling into their own bed, the creak of wood mirroring your own movements. You blow out the candle, letting the dark fold over you. The muffled beat of the wind against the thatch is softer here than in the larger inn, more like the gentle tapping of fingers than the push of a storm. The building seems to hum faintly, as though it's remembering the day alongside you. Lying back, you feel the blanket's roughness against your cheek, the familiar unevenness of the straw beneath you. The scent of the hearth downstairs lingers faintly in the room, mixing with the smell of rain still clinging to your cloak. The quiet here isn't empty. It's full of the slow breathing of the inn, the heartbeat of a place that has sheltered countless nights just like this one. Your eyes drift shut, and the line between waking and sleeping begins to blur. The inn holds you the way it has held so many before, steady and unhurried, until the night closes in around you completely. It's the faintest change that wakes you, not a sound exactly, but a shift in the air. The cold that pressed close during the night has softened. Somewhere below, a new fire must have been coaxed into life. The straw under you still holds the shape of your body, warm where you've been lying, cooler toward the edges. You lie still for a moment, listening. The building is quiet, but not silent. Somewhere in the hallway, a footstep slides over the boards, slow and deliberate. It passes your door, followed by the whisper of cloth brushing against wood. A moment later, you catch the sound of a door opening, the brief creak of hinges, then a soft thud as it closes again. The air carries a faint, tempting smell, bread warming near the hearth, the edges crisping as the heat licks at them. Beneath it comes another note, the low animal richness of something simmering in a pot. Breakfast will be simple, but the scent of it is enough to coax you upright. Your room is still dark, except for a thin stripe of pale light slipping through the seam in the shutters. You sit on the edge of the bed, pulling your boots toward you. The leather is cool stiff with yesterday's damp, but the simple act of lacing them steadies your mind. The day outside will be wet underfoot. You can feel it in the faint dampness that clings to the air. The hallway is almost empty when you step into it. Down the far end, the innkeeper moves like a shadow, carrying a small stack of bowls in one hand, a jug tucked under her arm. She glances your way briefly, her expression unreadable in the dimness, and continues without speaking. Somewhere behind her, a door to the outside creaks open, letting in a thin stream of cool, gray light. The stairs give their familiar complaints under your weight. The smell of the fire thickens as you descend, mixing with the sharper scent of wood smoke. The hearth has been rebuilt for the day, flames crackling under fresh logs. A small pot swings gently from its iron hook, steam curling upward into the rafters. A few early risers occupy the tables, men hunched over their mugs, hands wrapped around them, as if to trap the heat inside. No one speaks much yet. The room holds that quiet specific to the hour before the day truly begins, when thoughts are still gathering and bodies are waking slowly. The innkeeper sets a wooden bowl in front of you without ceremony. Inside is porridge thick and pale, dotted with what might be barley. A small drizzle of honey glistens on the surface, the golden thread catching the firelight. Beside it, a slice of bread rests on the trencher, still warm enough to send up a faint curl of steam. You eat slowly, letting the warmth spread outward from your stomach. The porridge is earthy with a chew that speaks of grains boiled long in the pot. The bread's crust crackles softly under your teeth, giving way to a dense, satisfying crumb. Outside, the first real clatter of the morning begins the creak of wagon wheels, the clipped call of a man to his horse, the splash of water thrown from a bucket onto the muddy lane. The innkeeper's voice drifts over from the bar, low but firm, as she gives instructions to the boy sweeping near the hearth. Each stroke of the broom stirs a faint dust that dances briefly in the slant of light, now creeping in through the shutters. As you finish your meal, the door swings open to admit a gust of brisk air. A farmer steps in his cloak, damp his boots, caked with mud. He gives a wordless nod to the room and heads straight for the fire, holding his hands out to the flames. The day is beginning. The slow heartbeat of the inn is shifting into its work rhythm, every movement a familiar part of the whole. And you, for the moment, are still within it, just another traveler, folded into its quiet, unhurried morning. You linger over the last bite of bread, reluctant to face the cool air, waiting just beyond the door. The hearth crackles softly behind you, the bowl in front of you still faintly warm to the touch. But inns are never meant to be permanent. They exist for people like you passing through, taking what comfort they can before the road calls them onward. You shoulder your pack and nod to the innkeeper. She returns the gesture with that quiet, businesslike kindness you've come to expect from her, the kind that neither clings nor turns cold. A moment later, you're pushing open the heavy door. The morning greets you with a thin mist that clings to your face like cool breath. The lane is muddied from yesterday's rain, its edges littered with small puddles that hold dull reflections of the pale sky. The smell of damp earth rises as your boots find their rhythm again. Behind you, the inn's sign swings faintly in the breeze, the soft creak of its chain fading with each step. You glance back once to see the outline of the building half blurred in the mist, its small windows glowing with the orange heart of the fire inside. Then it's swallowed by the curve of the lane, folded away, like a memory you can only call up in fragments. The countryside opens itself slowly. Hedgerows dark with wet leaves line the road, their branches bowing under the weight of the mist. Here and there, a gap in the greenery reveals a patchwork of fields stretching toward the low, distant hills. A few crows rise from the furrows, their calls sharp against the quiet. The road itself carries the marks of the morning's traffic, the wide grooves of a wagon wheel, the sharp cuts of a horse's hoof, the softer, uneven impressions of bare or booted feet. Somewhere ahead, faint voices float back to you two men, speaking in that easy, unhurried way of people who have known each other all their lives. By midday, the mist begins to lift. The sky reveals itself in washed-out blues and silvers, and the light glances off the wet grass, making it glimmer faintly. You pass a solitary figure, heading toward the village you've just left, her back bent under a bundle of firewood. She gives you a brief nod without breaking her pace. The road narrows as it dips into a shallow valley where a stream runs under a small, lichen-covered bridge. You pause there, resting your pack against the stone wall. The water moves lazily, curling around the moss-green rocks with a low, steady gurgle. It feels like a good place to drink, so you crouch and fill your palm, the chill of it biting your skin before you sip. Your thoughts drift easily in the quiet. The rhythm of the road has its own kind of lullaby, the measured crunch of boots on damp soil, the faint whisper of wind over grass, the occasional distant bark of a dog from some unseen farmstead. Out here, time has a different shape, stretched elastic, slipping by without much notice. By late afternoon, the air changes again. The light dips toward gold, and the long shadows of the hedgerows stretch across the road. The breeze carries the faintest trace of wood smoke from somewhere ahead, curling into the cooling air like a promise. Your legs, though weary, quicken a little. You've learned to read these signs. A bend in the road reveals it at last, the faint outline of a roof against the dimming sky, a chimney breathing smoke into the evening. The building sits a little apart from the road, its windows small but bright in the encroaching dusk. It isn't large, more of a way house than a grand inn, but already you feel the day's weight shifting off your shoulders. The door stands open just a crack, letting out a ribbon of golden light that spills onto the threshold. You can hear the low murmur of voices inside, the scrape of a chair leg, the soft clink of crockery. You step forward, feeling the road's chill loosen its grip as you reach for the handle. The moment you step inside, you're greeted not by a roar of conversation, but by the soft, steady hum of a few voices blending with the crackle of the hearth. The warmth is immediate, wrapping itself around you like a thick cloak after the long chill of the road. This isn't a grand stopping point for caravans or merchants. It feels more like someone's home that has over time learned to open its doors to travelers. The main room is modest. Low beams run the length of the ceiling, darkened by years of smoke. The tables are small, round, and well-worn, each with its own little scatter of candle stubs and scratches carved by idle hands. A single long bench runs along one wall beneath the narrow windows, the cushions flattened from years of use. Near the fire, two older men sit close together, their heads bent over a small board game with carved wooden pieces. One moves a piece slowly, deliberately, then leans back with the satisfaction of a man who knows his opponent has only one choice left. The other grumbles good-naturedly, reaching for his mug before taking his turn. The innkeeper appears from a doorway to your left, a woman with her sleeves rolled up, her hair pulled into a loose knot. She greets you with a nod and a faint smile as if she already knows your kind, the weary sort damp from the road, grateful for warmth. Without asking, she gestures toward a small table near the hearth and disappears into the back again. You take the seat she's offered. The chair creaks under you, but the wood is sturdy. From here, you can see the entire room without turning your head. There's a comfort in that, knowing exactly where everyone is and how the space fits together. A few moments later, the innkeeper returns with a wooden cup of ale. It's cool to the touch, the foam clinging stubbornly to the sides. You take a slow sip, the taste is lighter than the brews you've had before, a little sweeter, almost like something meant to refresh rather than weigh you down. Soon after comes a small plate, a thick slice of bread, pale cheese, and a bowl of something steaming. It's a kind of pottage, thick with barley and lentils flecked with bits of carrot and onion. The steam carries a scent of herbs you can't quite name. You taste it and find it hearty and grounding, the kind of food that makes you realize how long it's been since your last proper meal. The fire snaps softly beside you, the light glancing off the worn grain of the table. The two men continue their game in quiet concentration, only occasionally breaking into small bursts of laughter. A dog lies curled at their feet, opening one eye briefly when you shift in your seat, before drifting back into its dream. The innkeeper moves between her few guests with practiced ease. She refills a mug, here places a fresh candle there, and pauses by the fire to turn a small pot that's warming beside the flames. You catch a faint smell of apples, maybe a cider for later in the evening. The hours seem to fold in on themselves here. Outside, the daylight is fading into that deep blue that comes just before full darkness. The windows gather a faint mist on their panes, and beyond them the world blurs into shapes without edges. Inside, the air stays steady and warm, as if the inn is keeping the night politely at bay. By the time your plate is empty, you've sunk far enough into the rhythm of the room that you hardly notice the minutes passing. The game by the fire comes to its quiet conclusion. The men shake hands without words, their mugs clinking once in finality. The dog stretches, yawns, and resettles in exactly the same spot. You lean back, the ale warm in your stomach, the heat of the hearth still brushing your boots. You're not just sheltered from the night, you're folded into a pocket of it, wrapped in the low murmur of voices and the smell of wood smoke. The road feels far away now, as if it belongs to someone else entirely. The air in the common room has grown thicker with warmth, the scent of wood smoke and slow-cooked grains lingering in the corners like old friends unwilling to leave. Outside, full night has pressed against the windows, turning them into dark mirrors. The candles burn lower, their flames dipping with each faint draft that slips in whenever the door opens. Your ale is nearly gone, the last swallow lukewarm, but you linger with the cup between your hands. The game by the fire has ended, the two men drifting toward the bar to exchange a few more words with the innkeeper before pulling on their cloaks. Their departure leaves the room quieter still, the dog padding over to stretch out nearer the warmth of the hearth. The innkeeper moves more slowly now, her earlier rhythm giving way to the patient pace of someone guiding the day toward its rest. She douses one candle on the far table, then another trimming the light, so the room settles into a deeper calm. Her voice is low when she speaks to the remaining guests, offering a final refill, a last bite of bread before the kitchen closes. You feel the day's miles settling into your bones, the soft heaviness of them urging you toward bed. The thought of the road is distant now, replaced by the comfort of knowing you have a place to sleep that isn't under the open sky. The stairs are narrow and steep, their boards sighing under your weight. Halfway up, you pause to glance back into the common room. From here, the scene looks like a painting. The glow of the fire, the hunched figure of the dog, the innkeeper moving in the background with a cup in her hand. Then the corner swallows the view and you're climbing again. Your room is small, smaller than the one from last night, with a sloped ceiling that forces you to duck as you enter. A single bed sits under the eaves, its straw mattress neatly covered with a plain wool blanket. There's a wooden stool by the window and a stub of candle on the narrow sill. The air is cooler here, touched with the faint scent of dried herbs hung from a beam overhead. You set your pack down at the foot of the bed and sit for a moment, letting your eyes adjust. The muffled sounds of the common room drift faintly upward, a chair scraping the innkeeper's low voice, the soft clink of crockery being stacked away. Above you, the roof creaks once in the night air, a slow, measured sound that feels more like breathing than settling timber. You pull off your boots, your feet grateful for release, and stretch your legs under the blanket. The rough wool scratches faintly at your skin, but the warmth it traps is immediate. The stool by the window tempts you, so you rise again and sit for a while, peering out into the darkness. The village is little more than shapes, now a few roofs barely outlined against the sky, the occasional glimmer of a candle in a far-off window. The road disappears into blackness, its path invisible beyond the edge of the lantern's reach. Somewhere distant, a dog barks twice, then falls silent. The candle stub beside you burns steadily, its small light pooling on the sill. You watch the flame for a while, feeling the quiet wrap itself tighter around you. When you finally blow it out, the room deepens into shadow, the only sound the soft rustle of the blanket as you slip back into bed. Sleep comes easily here, not because the bed is perfect, but because the road is far away, the walls close and familiar, and the inn feels like it has taken you into its keeping. The first sound you notice is the faint clatter of something being set on a table downstairs, a wooden cup maybe, or a spoon dropped into a bowl. You keep your eyes closed for a moment, listening. The inn isn't truly awake yet, but it's stretching, testing its joints before the day begins. The fire downstairs crackles in low bursts, a few voices murmur, and the boards creak with slow, measured steps. The air in your room is cool, touched with that thin light that comes just before sunrise. You sit up, pulling the blanket around your shoulders for a moment, before slipping out of bed. The straw mattress shifts and sighs under your weight. Your boots are cold when you slide them on, stiff with yesterday's damp. The stairs greet you with their familiar creak. At the bottom, the innkeeper is already at work, pouring ale into cups, ladling porridge into wooden bowls, slicing bread still warm from the oven. She glances up and gives you a quiet nod before returning to her tasks. The smell of the bread is deep and comforting, the crust carrying that faint scorch from where it brushed the oven's walls. She sets a bowl before you without asking. The porridge is thick, the surface slicked with a faint shimmer of melted butter. A heel of bread rests beside it, the steam curling into the cool air as you break it open. You eat slowly, letting each bite anchor you in this small, steady moment. The warmth spreads outward from your stomach, easing the stiffness in your limbs. Around you, the few other early risers keep to themselves. A pair of farmers sit near the door, talking in low tones about the day's work ahead. The dog from last night curls at their feet, nose tucked under its tail. The two old men from yesterday's game haven't appeared yet. The chairs they favored are empty, waiting. When your bowl is empty, you linger over the last swallow of ale, watching the light outside shift from silver to a pale gold. The village beyond the window begins to stir. A cart rattles over the cobbles. A hen flutters out into the lane. A woman sweeps her doorstep. The world is waking, each sound layering over the quiet, until the day has properly begun. You pull on your cloak, now fully dry, and shoulder your pack. The innkeeper meets you at the door, her hands dusted with flour. She wishes you safe travel in the clipped way of someone who has seen hundreds of travelers pass through and knows the words are enough. You thank her, stepping out into the cool air. The door closes behind you with a soft thud. The inn's sign sways gently above your head, the faint creak of its chain, the only farewell. You pause for a last glance. In the early light, the building looks much as it did when you arrived, low, weather-worn, quiet in its own self-possession. Soon it will fold you into its long memory of guests who have eaten at its tables, warmed their hands at its fire, and moved on into the road's uncertainty. You turn toward the lane, your boots finding their rhythm on the damp earth. The road stretches ahead, empty for now, open to whatever lies beyond the bend. The warmth of the inn still lingers in you, a steady ember you can carry until night falls again, and another door opens to welcome you in. And now the road is yours again. The sky, still pale, hangs above the hedgerows like a quiet promise. You walk with the soft heaviness of someone who has slept in safety, who has eaten well enough to keep moving. The air carries the scents of wet grass and wood smoke mingling in a way that feels older than the road itself. It's easy to imagine that nothing has changed in hundreds of years, that these same inns have stood here forever, taking in the weary, feeding them from the same pots, sending them back out into the same muddy lanes. Perhaps they have. The sound of your boots becomes its own rhythm, unspooling the miles behind you. The warmth from the inn's hearth is still inside you, an echo in your muscles, a memory you can reach for when the wind sharpens later in the day. You know that by nightfall, the road will again offer you a choice: push on into darkness, or search for that small glow ahead, the one that means a roof, a fire, and the company of strangers who will be familiar enough by morning. Inns are never forever. They're pauses, breathing spaces in the long thread of travel. They hold your tired body for a while, surround you with smells and sounds that say you've made it through another day. And then, like all good pauses, they let you go. So tonight, if your eyes are growing heavy, think of the firelight on old beams, the soft creak of stairs under careful steps, the smell of bread warming on the hearth. Let that warmth fold around you like a blanket. The road can wait until morning.